Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Timo Rissanen. I am the Assistant Professor of Fashion Design and Sustainability in the School of Fashion at Parsons, and I'm also one of the Associate Directors of the Dishman Environment and Design Center here at the new school, as well as the Associate Dean of the School of Constructed Environments at Parsons. I sometimes forget all of my titles. Again, really thank you for being here, and I want to begin with some other thanks as well. First, I would like to thank the Nth Degree for their help in promoting tonight's important event. The Nth Degree series is a curated series of events featuring thinkers, visionaries, and creators who redefine the cutting edge. The series continues the New School's century-long tradition of forward thinking by hosting lectures, performances, panels, and other public programs that highlight the work of individuals from diverse fields, from artists and activists to scientists to policy experts, who develop bold, creative solutions to today's most pressing problems. And if you don't know, just on that series, Dr. King spoke on this stage in 1964. So that gives you a sense of the kinds of things that we do here at the new school in these spaces. As a practice-based academic and scholar, I have been in this work of fashion and sustainability now for nearly 15 years. Of those, I have spent 8 here at Parsons, working on sustainability curriculum across the college. In 2013, I was on the team that launched Sustainable Systems, a required course for all undergraduate students at Parsons. Taken by over 1,000 students each year. I was also on the team that developed the 4 pathways in the BFA Fashion Design program, including the Systems and Society pathway, in which students have the opportunity to focus on systems-oriented solutions to some of the challenges in fashion. And I really have to say that it is a true privilege to be working here. On behalf of the School of Fashion, I can say that we are very grateful to Aisha Barenblatt of Remake. Aisha founded and is the director of Remake for this partnership that has led to tonight's event. This partnership with Aisha and Remake came through our Dean Burak Çakmak's decade-long friendship with Aisha. They have worked together on sustainability since he was at the Gap and Gucci. Remake's mission to humanize the fashion supply chain and get the next generation of designers and consumers to get to know the women and communities most impacted by our fashion choices made real intuitive sense to us here at Parsons. Through Parsons and Remake's now 2-year-long partnership, we have screened the documentary film The True Cost in this very space, and we hosted the film's director Andrew Morgan, and we have sent our student designers to Cambodia and most recently to Sri Lanka. And I really think I saw at least one of the students who went to Cambodia in 2016 come in earlier, so really thank you for returning. We have also brought in Remake stories and films into our workshops and classrooms, and with Associate Professor Yvonne Watson joining the Remake team most recently, we are interested in exploring ways to bring this human-centered thinking and conversation into our classrooms. I do want to point out that we are now less than 4 weeks away from the 5th anniversary of the Rana Plaza building collapse in Bangladesh. In this event, 1,138 people lost their lives. Many more were injured and hundreds of children were left orphaned. 1,138 people dead for fashion. I will assert that a single one is too many. And I fully support Remake's mission to humanize the supply chain. As long as we abstract real people to concepts such as a supply chain, and we abstract their deaths to terminology like externalized costs, I doubt that we will make a change. And as you will see tonight, real people sit behind the sewing machines that make the clothing that we're all wearing here tonight. Many of you would have read this week's news of H&M's $4.3 billion worth of unsold inventory. The tragedy of Rana Plaza and the tragedy of wasted resources are symptoms of a larger ill. Our economic system values growth and profit over all else, making waste of water, of land, and of human life. The questions are there for us. How far do we want to push this? What else and who else are we willing to lose? When is enough enough? I have a request for each of you here tonight. Responding to the request will require courage and a healthy dose of imagination. Imagine a world without consumers. Stop relating to yourself as a consumer. The concept of the consumer was created in the 20th century, and I invite all of us to leave that word in the century that it belongs in. It does not honor what we are capable of as citizens, as human beings, and I invite you tonight to spend the evening with a group of fellow human beings. Tonight we will be screening Made in Sri Lanka, and we will be in an interactive conversation with Associate Professor Yvonne Watson, Aisha Barenblatt from Remake, and our students Ioli Tuka and Yimin Deng, who went to Sri Lanka with Remake. We also have the opportunity to enjoy art created by Ioli and Yimin, some of which you saw outside. And we also have a wonderful closing speaker who I will introduce a little bit later on. Often seeing the underbelly of the fashion supply chain can be overwhelming. Remake and Parsons are aligned in our vision to come from more of a place of hope and what we can do about the wicked problems that plague this industry. We are committed in our focus to make fashion a force for good. In keeping with this sentiment, there is no better person than our keynote speaker, who I have the honor of introducing now. Paul Dillinger is the head of global product innovation at Levi Strauss Co. Paul is one of the most iconic and successful designers of our time that is committed to sustainability. He has served on the Levi Strauss Foundation board, which focuses on the well-being of garment workers in their portfolio, and most recently is serving on Remake's board. And in fact, it was funding from the Levi Strauss Foundation that initially made this partnership possible, so we are extremely grateful. At Levi's, Paul has been integral to developing front-end methods for applied sustainability in the design process, including his recent Levi's Well-Thread and Auditorium collection, a result of a fellowship with the Aspen Institute. He has also won awards for his recent collaboration with Google for the Jacquard jacket that breaks ground in wearable technology through a durable touch-sensitive fabric. And you will actually see that jacket tonight if you've not seen it before. Before joining Levi's, Dillinger worked as a fashion designer and brand development specialist for 16 years at a variety of fashion brands in New York, including Calvin Klein and Deacon AY. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Paul to the stage so he can share with us how he designs with intention, thinking about impacts on people and on our planet. And really thank you, Paul.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that august introduction. I really hope to live up to it. I'd like to talk today about ethical systems, ethical fashion systems. And I think ethical fashion systems are something we can think of as being distinct from sustainable fashion systems. Because I think we're looking at a picture of a sustainable fashion system. This is a painting by Peter Bruegel the Elder from 1568, entitled "The Parable of the Blind Leading the Blind." It is both a good topic for a good image to look at on this topic. It's also a wonderful metaphor for the idea of a fashion designer getting up and talking about what a sustainable fashion system might look like, because this is the blind leading the blind into a new space. One pair of breeches, maybe two tunics, maybe a cloak, maybe a pair of boots, and maybe a pair of shoes at best. That's the trousseau of most of Europe for most of human history. The people painted in this painting likely knew the name of the person who made the clothes. If not, their parents did, because that might be where they got the clothes from. This notion of excess, this notion of a full closet is a relatively modern notion. Of course, concurrent with the lives described in this Peter Bruegel painting, we know that we also had her. We had people like Marie Antoinette, here painted by Elizabeth Vigée Lebrun in 1778. The painting is Marie Antoinette in court dress. There were extremes. The ledger that kept by Rose Bertin tells us that the material cost of this particular gown was around, adjusted for inflation, of course, was around $74,000 in materials, roughly 5 times that spent on labor. We know that Marie Antoinette had an annual dress budget of, adjusted for inflation, $3.6 million. It generally exceeded by a factor of 2. So, over $7 million spent a year on clothes. And at the time that this painting was made, there were 14 female sovereign in Europe, Duchess of Ravenna or Tsarina of Russia, but there were maybe 24 people who were participating in this sort of, in her tier of the fashion system. She was generally wearing 3 new gowns a day. Rarely did she rewear those garments. But she didn't throw them away. They were given to ladies in her court. They were given to the people around her. That what we're looking at here is really a painting of a sustainable fashion system, because there were 24 ladies that got to participate. And that's an interesting dilemma, because here the sustainable system is not remotely ethical, that there seems to be a need for a democratization of access to the system. And so I would offer you a potential trajectory of democratization. Here we have Kirsten Dunst at the premiere of Marie Antoinette. She's wearing a beautiful dress. It's Olivier Theiskin for Rochat. It was valued at about $17,000, but it was given to her free because it was marketing, because she was going to wear it at the red carpet premiere of Marie Antoinette at Cannes. The year that Marie Antoinette came out was 2006, and there were over 240 movies released in the United States that grossed more than $1 million. So we could say likely 240 red carpet moments for 240 different celebrities, different movie stars. And this represents a trajectory of democratization, where we still have this sort of ultimate social opportunity for fashion. Previous slide was Marie Antoinette. That's a court dress. Here we have a red carpet moment. Those are sort of, in our minds now, somewhat commensurate moments of a high stakes fashion. But now we've got a woman who no one's thinking she wore a dress like this the night before. No one thinks she's going to wear a dress like this the next night, right? It's a sort of a more approachable, realistic, democratized fashion system, but still a little beyond our reach, right? 17 grand for a one-night dress. But it is our aspiration for this opportunity, this moment of glamour, and that brings us to a 2014 image of Hickory Flats, Georgia, Sequoia High School senior prom. And they've got tiaras, right? They could be princesses, but we all know they're not, right? We all know we know that the relationship between these young ladies and Marie Antoinette is tangential at best. But we've opened up the system and given access, and which seems like a trajectory of ethics, a more democratized system. But when we think about the fact that the average American spends on clothing every year $978, which it's an unfortunately related statistic. The average spend per American household on senior prom is $978. So that this access to a democratized fashion system is leading to moments when a young woman is going to spend as much on one night as she would otherwise spend on 1 year. If you look at the average spend for a family in a household making more than $50,000 for the prom, that average spend is just under $800. The average spend on a household making less than $25,000 a year is $1,300. A disproportionate spend for the lower income family, some inherent unfairness. Perhaps there wasn't inherited jewelry. Perhaps there wasn't access to other shared objects that could have reduced expense. But that everyone gets to participate is what has created an unnecessary, that's a little harsh, but an unnecessary $4 billion industry that is teaching everyone in America that they actually get to dress up like Marie Antoinette for one night of the year. And in this movement towards democratization, have we approached anything closely resembling ethical? I don't think so. what we've got as a result of this democratization is a vastly bloated global fashion system. It's a big industry. It's an important industry. You know, about 2% of our gross global product in this industry. You know, about 58 million people worldwide employed in this industry. And an industry that's been growing tremendously and providing jobs and economic opportunity all over the world. But in the past 50 years, it's an industry that's increased by a factor of 5 in its scale. 500% increase in the size of the industry, but the average spend per American household has gone from 12% of annual income 50 years ago to 3% of annual income today. So vast reduction in the actual investment in an industry that has increased by weight its output by a factor of 5. And so there's tremendous, extraordinary value being extracted, and it's being extracted somewhere. And I think getting at the roots of where that value is being diminished, it gets us to really the important point of this evening's discussion, that the extraction of value is by and large being taken on the labor. That's not to say that the materials themselves haven't reduced in value. That's not to say that any of the clothes that we buy now are anywhere nearly as well made as some of the clothes we bought 50 years ago. But we have by democratizing access and satisfying appetite, we have grossly exceeded the necessary size of the industry. And then once you supply the demand, you then have to figure out how to discard that supply. You know, this image here is of baled clothing. Well, the image adjacent to the beautiful shopping mall, baled clothing on its way to Nigeria. Of course, this photo was taken prior to the closure of the Nigerian import market to U.S. export of used clothes. Six Central African nations just recently came together to ban the importation of our used clothes because they can't handle it all. Of course, the U.S. is responding with a suit in the World Trade Organization for antitrust. That we're going to sue them for them refusing to take our old clothes, which seems somewhat unfair. But in increasing by a factor of 5 the quantity of clothing that we purchase, that we use, at a time over the same amount of time, our closets have only increased by about 200%. Like there's no way we could keep all the shit that we buy. We've got to do something with it. But of all the extraordinary quantity of clothing that we get rid of every year in the U.S., and we're talking about, 13 million tons of clothes, 11 million tons of which is sent directly to the landfills. Only about 13% of it is actually redeployed in the form of a gift to a person in Africa who might want our used clothes. This notion of exporting our guilt to forgive our consumption is obscene, but most obscene is the fact that it is less than 0.1% that ever makes it into a recycling bin. That although we're willing to give away perfectly good clothes, we're never willing to try to figure out how to actually ethically resolve them. And so it is 0.001% of all of that 13 million tons that ever gets redeployed as an alternative to first-generation materials. So not only do we have this extraordinary energy around shopping, we have this extraordinary apathy around the redeployment of the thing that we shouldn't have bought in the first place. And what is the impact of this extraordinary excess? And this is, when I was learning about global geography, I was learning the geographic features of Asia, and I would count from the left, the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea, and then the Aral Sea, right? This was, the Aral Sea was once the 4th largest lake in the world. The Aral Sea is larger than Lake Michigan. The picture of the Aral Sea in '87 and the Aral Sea in 2014. It's now officially designated the Aral Qum Desert. Because the borders it borders on Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, and 2 of the largest rivers in Central Asia ran into the Aral Sea, but then the cotton industry exploded starting in 1987 to satisfy Western demand for this outrageous rate of consumption. And over time, what was once the 4th largest lake in the world it disappeared to feed our need for cheap cotton. that used to have a vibrant fishing industry. I know when we look at things from a satellite, they're often an abstraction. So let's look at it closer up. Those are personal economies. Those are human jobs. Those are families that we're getting fed that aren't. And now actually the cost to import the protein calories necessary to replace the fishing industry that once thrived in the RLC, now the cost to import that protein exceeds the actual value of the crop that they're exporting to us so that we can have cheap jeans and chinos. And there seems to be something particularly unfair because the residue from all of the pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers that then flowed into the RLC was at least captured in the mud of the sea, is now simply free to blow around in the dust storms coming off the Arakum Desert, contributing to the highest rates of infant mortality in the world in these areas of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan that border on this once vibrant lake. If we go back, just a fun fact, even more depressing, fun fact, the island that you see there, the sort of like arrowhead-shaped island, that was in the RLC, that was the testing and storage facilities for the Soviet Union's stockpiles of biological and chemical weapons that once abandoned and left completely dry, that's the only place where grass still grows in that area, so herds of wild sheep will actually go and graze there, thereby kicking up clouds of anthrax. So all as a byproduct of our avarice, of our greed for clothing. And so if we look at 1987 to 2014 and the impact of our want of clothing, what did we really get in those years? And I think it's a good question to ask because if Kramer walked off the set of Seinfeld and onto the set of Modern Family, you'd notice he and Cam are wearing the same bowling shirt quite often. That Jerry Seinfeld's go-to look and Phil Dunphy's go-to look are pretty much the same look. And I know a lot of amazing things happen in these years, like, from the Antwerp School or Gianni Versace's Glamazon XS, or like, I loved the Marc Jacobs for Perry-Ellis grunge fiasco, and I loved I loved it all in those 30 years. But at a very, very refined tier, a lot was happening. But for every man, for the people that represented the Peter Bruegel blind beggars from the first slide, the most of us, what really happened in those years? And the truth is not a lot. Not a lot, except instead of one in 87, we'd now be buying 3 of the same thing in 2014, and it would have been shittier, right? That the quality has declined. All the while, we're robbing the planet of necessary resources and inflicting grave harm on the communities that make our clothes. And so, a democratized system that facilitates excess doesn't seem to be the ethical system either. A new report from McKinsey just came out this fall that's important to note. 6 out of 10 things that were bought last year ended up being incinerated or buried will be incinerated or buried in their first year of production. So think of the extraordinary quantity of clothing we see in the malls and in fast fashion stores that we see with these tremendous business results year after year, comping like nobody. Just know that 6 out of 10 things bought there will likely end up incinerated or buried in the first year. From Levi Strauss's own life cycle assessment, we know that the water impact from the making of one pair of jeans over its life cycle equals the drinking water needs of one person, or 5 people for 1 year. One jean is the equivalent to the Spice Girls' worth of water needs for a year. And it's an extraordinary thing when you think about 6 out of every 10 jeans being discarded. Doing the math really quickly, that's 30 Spice Girls being discarded every year. It's an extraordinary reconsideration of the impact of the one thing that you buy. And just imagining, I guess, how much better could any one thing be if all those other things didn't have to have been made in the first place. The reinvestment in resources, the reinvestment in quality, and geez, you'd be able to find it in your closet, right? And all of that seems particularly problematic if you consider the fact that there are 738 million people in the world who suffer thirst on a daily basis. The fourth largest lake in the world is gone, and one gene takes up the drinking water needs of 5 people for a year. This many people suffering from thirst every day. And we have to start to ask ourselves, what right do any of us have to shop at all? But that's depressing, and that's not why any of us are here. We like fashion because fashion should be fun. It should improve, it should bring joy, it should bring jobs. Making clothes should be considered a noble profession again. Being a fashion designer shouldn't be a mark of shame, which it is to a degree. And all of this makes me think about a pair of jeans that Levi's has in its archive that is 139 years old. It was purchased from a Japanese dealer, vintage clothing dealer, who did not know its age at the time they sold it to us. They had made a few repairs on some of the belt loops and some wear at the knee, because the intention was they were selling a garment that they thought would be worn. Not knowing that they were the oldest known pair of jeans in the world, on objective assessment, they were a wearable pair of jeans. And so they thought they were selling them to someone who was going to wear them. And that is possible. And we have to ask ourselves, how many of the garments in our closets today stand up to that kind of test? Do we think that this garment, after a vigorous life in a gold mine somewhere in California or Nevada, is going to be wearable in 140 years? And likely the answer is no, but we know that it's doable because it's been done. So the question is, what needs to be done now to make clothes live up to that expectation? And so on the right is our friend Mira. And she's wearing a jacket that we recently made for her using the well-thread design methodology, which is a broad systems-based approach to sustainable design. The jacket, let me quickly describe some of its attributes that make it potentially an indicator of a sustainable and ethical fashion system. It deploys indication signifiers of traditional denim design, right? We recognize it as being aligned with iconic arrangements of Levi's style. It's a trucker jacket. It's made, however, with a denim that uses post-industrial cotton waste, chemically deconstructed and then re-extruded as a new fiber, then blended with cotton to vastly reduce the total water impact in the making of the cloth itself and of the fiber. And then at the mill stage, used a new chemical process that reduces to near zero the water needed to dye the garment. It was finished without the use of any water, no water in the laundering that gives us this sort of high-low abraded appearance, using primarily ozone and a light golf balling. That's a technical term. Every other component is made of 100% cotton. There's no polyester thread. All the labeling is made out of cotton. All the pocketing, which would traditionally be a cotton poly blend, it's a one fiber strategy, so that at the end of its life, it's not going to get thrown away. It can be actually redeployed, and there are no pollutants in there that would present as an undyeable trash in a recycling system. And the knit components, the sleeve and the hood, were made out of a sweatshirt I found on Etsy. It's an old Stanford varsity sweatshirt. It was cropped from that period in time when we cropped sweatshirts. So it's probably, probably from the late 60s or early 70s. It wasn't going to be worn as a cropped sweatshirt again, I promise you. And so removing the sleeves and the hood was able to come up with this cute style. That's an indication of a potential for a sustainable fashion system. Deeply thoughtful consideration of every component taking up my time instead of thoughtful consideration of a vast assortment taking up my time. And thoughtful consideration for the redeployment of all the assembled materials so that nothing here can't go somewhere else at the end of its life. And the other interesting solution is, I love this image on the left of a pair of old Levi's that were worn out and replaced with another pair of worn out Levi's behind them. The notion, Kate Fletcher cites this in her book, The Craft of Use, that the most radical object of fashion is likely already in your closet. That we have this tremendous backlog of resources in our overstuffed closets full of garments that maybe we shouldn't have bought in the first place. Those are the resources for a sustainable fashion system in the future. The resources are already there, they're already present. Pollyannish to suggest that we shouldn't ever shop again, but probably a good idea to start shopping out of our own wardrobes first. And so I don't want to end with it. I didn't want this to be an all doom and gloom, because there's a lot of doom and a lot of gloom in the earlier slides. So I wanted to ask consumers, and I couldn't think of the right word. Human being is probably the right word. We always say friends or fans, but it sounds patronizing. It sounds like marketing speak. So consumers at least sounded honest for the purpose of this discussion. But asking consumers to know what you buy. We talk a lot about transparency, and transparency is important. Any good fashion company will list out the places where it makes, so that if you wanted to, you could do the research to discover if that place is a reputable facility, reputable being relative, or if it's a disreputable facility. If you can't find out where something was made, chances are it's because they don't want you to know. On the continuum, at the opposite end of ethical fashion isn't neutral fashion, it's unethical fashion. And we have to understand that for every good actor that's putting out its story about sustainable ethical practices, anyone who's reluctant to share a story needs to be called out on that. And it's highly likely that they're not sharing something because they don't want you to know. And so know what you're buying. Buy what you need, and need can be relative, right? Like sometimes you need to feel cute, and that's okay. But going into a fast fashion boutique and buying a completely new identity off of a false identity for $30 is probably not what you need. Maybe you need to play around with what you already have. If you need to be a little cuter in that, learn to hem, right? I mean, sewing on a button is one thing. Learn to hem and get that skirt a little cuter. Respect what you own. There's nothing. Okay, the most energy consumptive appliance in our home is a giant box that we use to dry water. And that's a stupid use of energy, right? To dry water when water will naturally evaporate. The dryer is a cruel torture chamber for clothes, and we don't treat our clothes nicely. And one of the ways that gene in our archives stayed a good quality gene for 140 years is no one ever put it in a dryer. So respect what you own and repair what you have. I know that in the state of California, I think we switched our vocational education tracks in, I think it was '97, and there's still a fashion merchandising track in there. But in the push to remove gender bias from our vocational education, we got rid of shop and we got rid of home economics. That's great, but learn to sew on a button, learn to patch or repair, learn to darn a sweater, but just learn to take care of what you already have, because it's likely that cerulean blue is going to come around again, and you're going to want that particular shade, or whatever the narrative is that might say, it's okay that this little nick or damage in my clothes has ruined it forever because I wanted to buy something new. Nope, repair it and suffer the consequence of your spontaneous purchase. And then also share what you can. Swapping clothes among friends needs to be more common, and that's why I only have friends who are 6'3". But no, this notion of not an economy, but just a circle of friends needs to start taking over. Often people who discuss the idea of sharing economies and circular economies are people seeking to profit from their proliferation. And I think if we just got better at just sharing, I think we'd be in a good spot. But specifically for designers, I think it's very important as you go into the space that you know what you're getting into. Not that you proceed with this with cynicism or that you proceed with pessimism, but we look to you, the young students, to be optimistic, but also to be values aligned. Know your values. Know what you really care about. Write them down. Actually, make a sort of a manifesto of sorts to really help you sort of firm up what it is that you believe in as you launch your careers. And design with intention. Make sure you're thinking about those values as often as possible. First and foremost, though, you need to balance that sense of purpose with a sense of patience. You're going to spend a few years being incredibly frustrated because a lot of shitty decisions are being made by people who may not have had this sort of opportunity in their education or in their early professional life to cultivate this approach. And know that a lot of the data that tells us exactly how problematic our industry is new data. And so there's a lot of dinosaurs like me who've been doing this for too long and may not have become fully aware. And there's nothing we hate more than getting preached at by a young designer just out of one of these wonderful sustainable education courses at a design school. So be patient, be instructive, but not overbearing, and eventually you will be in positions of authority. Eventually you will be making decisions, and at the end of the day, simply do the right thing whenever you have a choice, and I think the industry on a whole will be better for it. Okay? With that, I think I'm opening it up for questions. If anyone would like to come forward, there are mics on either side, and we'll take a few questions before moving on. Or we could move directly on if anyone doesn't. Oh. Oh, okay. Well, you just go. Yeah. Oh, we don't have a mic over there. Okay.
I was just going to ask, what are the biggest obstacles you face as a designer in terms of becoming more sustainable? Sorry.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
What are the biggest obstacles that you face in terms of becoming more sustainable as a brand?
It's sustainability exists often as a big concept endorsed broadly at the top tier of the organization, but there's no playbook that tells anyone in trim purchasing how to be a sustainable trim purchasing manager. There's no playbook for the person who's handling sales samples distribution and allocation for the European showrooms on how they can do their job more sustainably. And so although we operate as a company generally guided by this profits through principles value set, and we definitely operate strategically with sustainability in mind, a tactical notion of how every participant in the process can engage is often missing. And so everyone assumes, oh, the corporate social responsibility wonks, or people like me, are handling it. And handling it actually means everybody handling it. And I think that sort of granular level playbook for everyone to do their part is really the thing that's missing. That and a holistic strategy to sustainable fiber supply. That's another one. But.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I'm just wondering, did you always think like this, or was there an aha moment throughout your career that really made you buy into this concept?
Yeah. I had been working for a premium denim company, nameless. Exited and started working for a vertically integrated specialty, American Eagle. Okay, and then jumped back to another premium denim company, also nameless. And after 5 years, straight leg, boot cut, wide leg, skinny, they were using the same fabric, cone 1662P, I remember the fabric code, to make the same fits basically with the same washes. Turns out they were both making at the same factory, Azteca, out of Mexico. And they both had the same retail price points. 5 years on, the price hadn't changed. The product was almost identical, but the accounts to which they were selling, Federated, was demanding higher margin, higher markdown expectation. They wanted greater profitability, and the only variable there was labor. And it was just evidently gross, patently gross, that 5 years on, the only thing that had changed was that people making them were suffering more. And so it was in that, and the fact that fashion was this bureaucracy that was resistant to change, it made me want to get out completely. And that was an aha for me. And so, because I wanted a less bureaucratic, change-resistant path in life, I went into academia and started teaching, which was misguided. And so I went back and ended up teaching at my undergraduate alma mater. I was amazed at the steps that the school had taken towards sustainability, just the absence of plastic bottles of any sort on campus for purchase. You couldn't get a bottle of water. All garbage cans had been labeled landfill, so for you to throw something away, you had to demonstrate your intention to put it in the ground, right? All these really interesting steps that had been taken, but the students themselves had never heard of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, had almost no consideration of either social or environmental sustainability in their education or in their motivation to become designers. And so I was challenged by my prospects in education as well. And at that moment, a call came through from Levi's offering me a chance to have the job of my dreams and try to affect change. So the aha was really the recognition that within the industry that change was being resisted and harm was being done, and then seeing that in the educational space that I was already too late by the time I got there. I would have had to go and turn off Project Runway and turn off the Rachel Zoe project to have realigned motivation at an earlier time. And so I thought by going to a company that had a big marketing arm that might be willing to invest in the right kind of message would possibly be the right route for me.
Cool, and we'll take 2 more questions. You and you are the 2 I saw.
Hi. Thank you. I'm sure everyone's going to say thank you. Thank you for talking. My question is more so about how we're approaching, I guess, communicating these messages to consumers. So this might not be for most of us in the room that have probably been to many events like this, but what do you think is going to be, I guess, the best strategy in terms of relaying these messages while other brands might try to capitalize on it without maybe making proper initiatives towards it?
Right. This is one where it's really the problematic question, is because most people approach the communication of sustainability strategies as a mechanism to sell more product. And so we walk this with this line ourselves, where do we talk about all that we do, or do we put it on our website under that, corporate social responsibility, click down, and hopefully someone cares enough to go and read it, and we actually have we can quantify through our traffic reports that no one does, right? That all that infographic about the quantity of water per gene, that's publicly available information on our website. That's not, and no one's reading it. So do we shout about it? Do we put a hang tag on things? My solution is generally to try to put the full story, or the fullness of the story as best I can, upside down on the inside front pocket bag of a pair of jeans, because the only time anyone's really interested in reading that information is when they're on the toilet. And so my hope is in the product that I make at Levi's is to make product that people will love and want to own long enough to pay attention to. But I believe that the quality of the product is the thing that must speak loudest. And I'm highly skeptical of organizations who talk too much about it. That said, I think people do want to leverage their values when they consume, when they purchase, and I think people want to be given, or want to be armed with the right information. Unfortunately, too little of the right information is ever what's actually shared. So it's a dilemma, and we confront that dilemma all the time, not wanting to use our values as a mechanism to incite sales. It's a tricky one. Oh.
And then where was the... There you are.
Hi. Yes, thank you coming from over here as well for everything you've said tonight. It's a lot of the things that I've been thinking about and wanting to hear more about as a working designer. I've been working for many years as a designer in the industry, and the advice that you just gave students to design in a way that's aligned with your integrity is something that I would really like to do more of, but find it very difficult to do. As a consultant, I need to bring, there's a lot of reasons why I've been finding it difficult, but one thing that I wanted to ask in my question is that as a designer, I need to bring really viable materials to my clients who may or may not have the same concerns as I do in terms of sustainability. So, I'm going to internalize my own values, but hopefully be able to affect change just in the materials and the different resources and the factories and everything that I'm presenting to my clients. I'm finding that I work with yarns as a knitwear designer, but all of the textile industry I feel like is a little bit behind the curve in terms of offering really viable, sustainable product from a designer's perspective, having materials that are tried and true that I know I can stand behind in terms of how it's going to wear. color assortments that are pleasing to whoever I'm presenting it to.
Aisha's saying wrap it up to me,
Okay.
so I have to convey that.
Okay.
by
So no,
way
I'm
of
just
you. So
wondering like
question.
how you can find like if as a designer that's working under the same circumstances with the same intentions, what do you where do you see the textile industry right now, and how quickly do you think they're going to catch up? Because as a designer, I want it to work in this way, but I feel like I'm being held back.
The short answer is you can't, insofar as the credible life cycle assessment that looks at total impact at every stage of the production, it costs several $1 million. We only do them once every 5 years for a reason. So if writ large, if you can't actually be responsible for the impact or for knowing the impact. There are some resources out there, some websites, and we can talk offline after this. We could, specific material sourcing kind of bureaus that are both here and in London, but also all of that information is going to give you a relative material impact, and by two really great materials that shouldn't go together can make like, for example, there's a tremendous value to recycled polyester, I guess. It's often blended with cotton, and it turns into an unrecyclable garment. And so what does it matter that you assert the value of a recycled first-generation material if you make something that can never, ever be a second-generation material? So things like that about the intelligent deployment of whatever material that you're using, and knowing that also, unfortunately, there's no such thing as an impact-free material. And so systems of consumption are far more insidious than systems of material sourcing. And I think, so the question is, are you working for clients and for companies where the sweater you're making is a great heirloom piece, an Aran sweater, or even the Margiela zip front cardigan that he hasn't changed in how many seasons, that full cardigan stitch that is $1,000 and worth it because it's never going to go out of style and it's never going to fall apart. Those sorts of design values might be actually a more useful direction for you to take your thinking than trying to hold yourself accountable for knowing information about a materials industry that is fundamentally structured for opacity. It's fundamentally structured to keep you from ever knowing. We hop our global cotton crop all together with the hopes that no one ever asks what's rain-fed and what's irrigated, what's conflict cotton from Central Asia, and what's ethically farmed and sourced from say, the American Southeast. So I would free yourself from the guilt of having to know about all of that stuff and go after the things that are more directly in your control, like the value of the thing you're making. I don't know. That's it. All right. Thank you very much.
I'm really short, so I'll stand here. Thank you so much, Paul, for helping us dream around what's possible. I hope you think and take for a moment. Here we have an iconic fashion designer who's sitting up here and telling us, buy less clothes. That's pretty insane, right? My name's Aisha, and I'm the founder of Remake. Much like Timo and Paul, I'm one of those from the dinosaur generation. I age well, but I'm really old. That has been banging my head when it comes to how do we make sustainability an integral part of the fashion industry. I worked on the policy side, I worked on the inside of brands. And when Rana Plaza fell down, I realized what we need is radical disruption. And my contribution to that is essentially setting up what I think of as the Peace Corps for the fashion industry. You know, the people, the communities that are most impacted by our insatiable consumption are hidden in our seams. We don't see it. We don't see it as designers. We don't see it as consumers. And so we do these learning journeys. They're really a labor of love for us, where we're taking influencers and next generation fashion designers to come meet her, sit down with her, have a meal, see the impact of mass production. I have this dream that one day, when you're looking at your label, when you're thinking about all the different countries that are reflected in your closet, for those of you who saw the map outside and we were pinning, you know, the whole global world is essentially reflected in our clothes. I have a dream that you come to my platform, remake.world, and for every country you see a story, a film short, a human that'll touch your life. And it is my hope through these stories, as well as through our learning journeys, that we're seeding the next generation of Pauls. Basically, I'm trying to figure out how do we clone him, how are there more of him out in the world. But also making it easier for all of us to remake our closet, to recognize that fast fashion is Tinder. right? It's just quantity over quality. How do we go back to those special relationships where essentially we loved things because loved things last, and fashion is about style and not trends? And so I'm going to play our film short next, made in Sri Lanka. As I said, it's been a real labor of love. It was such a privilege to take Yvonne and Yimin and Yoli. People often ask me, they're like, are you scared? You film in some pretty difficult locations, and sometimes yes. My board member was just talking about, maybe you need security, and we don't do it that way. We get kicked out of more factories than we're able to get in. We have sneaky ways. I'll not share how. But as you watch this, I want you to think about some of the bravery with which the women who nobody has ever asked her about her story show up in this short. And I look forward to having an interactive conversation with you after. So if we could please kill all the lights. Someone up there? Wonderful.
The fashion industry has engaged in a race to the bottom. In its quest to get our clothes to us cheaper and faster, it has left devastation on people and the planet. The Remake learning journeys come from my conviction of what has kept me going. It's because I've had the pleasure to meet her. Thousands of more than the 60 million, mostly women in their early 20s, who make our clothes. You all are the next generation of fashion designers who are also just coming into your consumer power. You are the hope of our industry to make it a force for good.
The way that I attach to my clothes is very emotionally, everything that I own, I feel like I curate and take on. So kind of bring that in with
As a consumer,
I always try and buy secondhand already because I know how much gets thrown away.
sustainability is how I approach fashion design.
I grew up in a fashion retail store that my parents owned. And so from a very young age, I was interested in fashion as a means of expression.
The meaning of fashion has changed a lot throughout my life. Right now, to me, fashion means a lot of problems and dilemmas, and I hope to use what I've learned to fix them.
I want to have a better understanding of what it's like to live outside of this country.
This will be my first time meeting women working in a garment factory.
The most exciting thing I want to see in Sri Lanka is really to visit big factories and be able to have sincere connections with the people around me, and then being able to make impact through these connections. I think that's what I hope to achieve.
I think it's really hard to talk about how you want to change global practices without knowing what the world looks like and where your clothes are coming from.
Everything was so immense. There were so many people, so many things going on, so much noise. It definitely left me speechless.
think when people design clothes, they're thinking about like the glamorous part of it. They're not thinking about the mountains of garbage. They're not thinking about that this isn't going to decompose, this is just going to add. The speed that they're working at, like, can you imagine working at this speed for hours?
And they've been doing it, you know, it's like their memory, it's like
muscle memory.
Muscle memory, there you go.
The more that we visited factories, the more that I can really understand the amount of work that happens at every level.
How long have you been working here?
10 months. How much do all of you earn?
Basic is 18,700. I take incentive overtime 28,000.
Do you guys find it difficult to support yourself with the salary that you own currently?
Drive කරනවා. ඒකත් එක තමයි බබාගේ වැඩ ටිකයි ගෙදර වැඩ සේරම මේ කරගන්නේ ඒ දෙකත් එක්කම තමයි. 30කට වඩා වැඩියෙන් ගන්න පුළුවන්.
Nice to meet you.
I'm from China.
I'm from Greece.
Greasy. Most of them work 6 days a week and then like 12 hours minimum.
අපි උපරිම වැඩ ගන්න තමයි කොහොමත් බලන්නේ. දැන් අපිට ටාගට් එක දී ගන්න බැරුව ගියොත් 10 වෙනකන් තියාගන්න. යට වෙනවනේ කියන්නේ. එතකොට සමහර වෙලාවට අසනීපයක් වුණා සමහර ළමයිට බෙහෙත් ටික ගන්නවත් සල්ලි නැතුව යනවනේ.
It took me like a moment to, you know, look around and realize what's happening. It was dark and crowded and basically not a place for people to live in. Can we sit here? Thank you. This? Brother? Mm-hmm. And these two?
They are twins.
Oh, so there are two and you. So 3 people. She lives with her twin brothers, so that was definitely a very small room for 3 people. How long have you been living here?
Have you ever heard about stories about sexual harassment about, you know, like people living in this boarding house?
Is it possible that like they can go to the police about it or?
පොලිසියට නම් ඉතින් අර එහෙම හිටියාම ඉතින් ළමයින් යන්නේ තද බලන්නේ ඒ දේවල් යන ගණන් ගන්න නැහැ ඉතින් අපිට යන්න ඕන නැත්තේ වැඩට යන්න ඕන නැත්තේ.
How does that make you feel?
ඔව් ඉතින් අර එහෙම දැක්කම උනත් දුක හිතනවා ටක් ගාලා ගෙදර කට්ටිය මතක් වෙනවා.
Listening to these women's stories and then learning parts about their lives, I just feel there's such a sense of urgency for me and for all of us to do something about it.
වැඩ කරන්න ඇවිල්ලා මම ෆැක්ටරි එක වැඩ කරා. මම මුලින් ඉඳන්ම පොඩ්ඩක් මොනවා හරි වැරද්දක් දැක්ක තැන කතා කරන ගතියක් මගේ ඇතුලෙන් තිබ්බා. එතකොට ඒකෙදි සැරලයින් එකේදී මගේ රස්සාව නැති වෙනවා. මගේ රස්සාව නැති කරනවා යාලා. සමාත් එක්ක මගේ වටේ හිටපු සහෝදර සහෝදරියෝ කීප දෙනෙක් හිටියා. එයාලත් එක්ක එකතු වෙලා තමයි ස්ටෑන්ඩ් අප් මූවමන්ට් එක පටන් ගත්තේ. එයාලට තියෙන ප්‍රධානම ප්‍රශ්න තමයි ජීවත් වෙන්න ප්‍රමාණවත් වැටුපක් මේ මූලික වැටුප ලෙස නොලැබීම.
How are they able to live on such amount.
එකක් වර්කර්ස්ලා Tamanට පුළුවන් උපරිම OT කරන්න උත්සාහ කරනවා. එයාලා කරන්නේ යාලට තියෙන විනාඩි 15 ටී බ්‍රේක් එක තමයි යාලා টয়ලට් යන්න වෙන නිසා වතුර බීම පවා අමතක කරනවා. ඒ තරමට හෙල්දි ලොකු ප්‍රශ්න ගොඩක් එතනින් පල්ලෙහාට තියෙනවා.
Ashila, I was so surprised when I met her. She doesn't have massive goals. She just wants specific changes to lead to something better for everybody's lives.
හැටියට අරගෙන වැඩ කරන හැඟීමක් මට ඉස්සර ඉස්කෝලේ යන කාලේ ඉඳලම බොහෝ පොදු වැඩවල කවුරුවත්ම නැත්නම් ඒ වෙනුවෙන් වැඩ කරන්න වෙන එකම දේ තමයි එක්කෝ වහල්ලු හැටියට මේක වැඩ කරන්න සිද්ධ වෙනවා. නැගත්තේ අතටම මේ වාල් දෙන්න එන්න කලින් මෙහෙට එන්න පළවෙනි වතාවට නේ මෙහි රස්සාවට ආවේ එහෙම නේ. මේ ඔයාලට මෙහි ආවට පස්සේ ජීවිතේ සම්පූර්ණ වෙනස් නේ. නින්ද යනවා.
අපි දෙන්නට බයයි. අපි දෙන්න දැන් මං හරි බයයි. මෙයාට වඩා මං බයයි. අරුමිතර මෙයා නැතුව මං කොහෙවත් යන්නේ. මෙතනින් එළියට මං යන්නේ මෙයා නැතුව. ගම බලංගොඩ ඒකෙන් ප්‍රසිද්ධම තියෙන්නේ දලු තමයි. ගොඩක් කට්ටිය දලු කඩන්න තමයි ගිහිල්ලා ඉන්නේ. මං රසාවක් කරාට ඒ රසාවෙන් පඩියක් ගන්න බැරි වුණා. මං ආව කියන්නේ ඒ මං ඉඳලා හරි දෙන්න ඉගෙන ගන්න ඕනේ. ඊට පස්සේ මට මොනවා හරි වෙලා හරි දෙන්න කියවනවා කවදා හරි කියනවා අක්කා ඉඳලා හරි අපි ඉගෙන ගත්තා කියලා හරි කියවනවා කියලා තමයි මං හිතාගෙන ආවේ. මං ආවේ සතුටින් නෙමෙයි ආවේ. අනේ මානි බාමේ.
අපි වැඩ කරන කාලේ මෙහි එහෙම ආයතනයක් ෆෝන් ආස කරන ඕන රැක උදව්වක් ඉල්ලුවොත් මොන වෙලාවෙ හරි ඇවිල්ලා උදව් කරන්න නේ. ඕකේ. එන යන්න ඈ. බයි.
It's people like Ashila who are going to make a difference. Because it's somebody who's here who understands what these workers are going through and to make sure that they are safe and that they are healthy. Do you have like a favorite dress or favorite piece of clothing that you like to wear? No? Oh, come on, there must be something.
Oh my God.
Oh,
so beautiful. මේක මගේ පඩි වලින් මගේ උපන් දිනියට මම ගත්ත එක මේක මම මේ ඉඳුමට ගොඩක් කැමතියි.
The issue right now is just most people don't know. Our industry would look a lot different if people actually had like a connection.
The first thing that I want to do once I go back is tell the people that have some impact in fashion that things need to change.
It's not about whether I'm optimistic about solving this problem, it just needs to be done. We have to do something about it.
These women, despite everything, are strong and resilient, and it makes me want to do everything I can to help.
මේකෙන් මොනවද ඉගෙනගෙන මං වගේ ළමයෙකුට මං කියලා දෙනවා ඉගෙන ගන්න බැරි වුණාට මං මේක අතේරියේ නෑ කියලා ඉස්සරහට යන්න.
Now that I've seen the human elements, I think I'm gonna have a totally different approach to how I create.
Our wonderful colleagues from Parsons who came along with me on this adventure to come up, and we'll share a little bit more behind this journey. I've watched this film so many times, but I always get emotional, so excuse me a minute.
Aisha, thank you so much. Thank you for everything that you do, and really thank you for the generosity of the partnership.
It's right back at you, Timo.
I am going to compose myself. I just really got reminded again why we have been doing this for the past 2 years. So really thank you. And I just want to introduce the two students, so Yoli Tsuka and Yimin Deng. Both are seniors in the BFA Fashion Design program, so they're graduating in about 6 weeks from now. And it really makes me optimistic and hopeful to know that young people like Yoli and Yimin are going into the industry and with the knowledge and understanding that they have. And then next to me is Associate Professor of Fashion, Yvonne Watson. We started at Parsons at the same time in 2010, and it's just a privilege to work with you, so thank you for being here. Yvonne is actually on academic leave, so I'm extra thankful that she's here tonight. Thank you. So just as we get started, I want to just point to something that many of you would have seen when you walked in, which were the iPads, and also we had something on the screen when you walked in. So Yoli, do you want to say a little bit about what that was? Or
Okay, so Yoli and I, we were seeing these incentives charts in the garment factory, which means like 100% efficiency for the assembly line of 40 workers means that 153 t-shirts made within an hour. And then both of us were just like, you know, let's try it out. Let's see if it's actually possible. And then, so, yeah.
It was
and it's
not. And also 130% efficiency.
They have also 130% efficiency, so it's just like...
Thank you for making that visual for us. So I have the great pleasure of leading this conversation, and you'll have another opportunity to ask more questions at the end of this session as well. But I'll start with you, Aisha, and really the founding of Remake. Why did you start Remake, and particularly after the kinds of experiences that you had, which you talked about a little bit at the start, and what is it that you want to accomplish with these journeys that you've done?
Thank you, Timo. So as I mentioned, I spent a long time working with both luxury and mass market brands and retailers on their sustainability, human rights practices. And sort of many years in, what I realized was that this was really a risk mitigation strategy, that the corporate social responsibility, sustainability departments are just not empowered. Often you sort of follow the money, and you know that the buyers, the merchants, the designers is sort of the other end of the value chain is where the power sits, and that these people, the slogging work that they're doing in their sustainability, corporate responsibility functions are literally putting out fires, literally and figuratively. And so what I realized was, well, what we're needing is different. We're dealing with both a demand and supply problem. We're needing different types of designers who are creating, as Paul mentioned, from a system standpoint with more intention. But what we're also needing is for consumers to realize that ethical fashion can be beautiful. And so I really think of Remake in many ways as a feminist women's powered movement. It's to say we take this next generation of designers, get them face to face with the women who make our clothes, and there's so many women now who want to wear their values, that my hope is that putting this human face through the videos, through the stories, gets us to really think about our fashion choices and say, just because I have, a feminist emblazoned on my shirt is not going to make me a feminist. I really have to think about the actual women who made that and whether she's better off or not.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn to you, Yvonne. What had you join the invitation to go to Sri Lanka with Remake and the students, and how does it relate to the broader scope of your work?
Yes. Yeah, I kind of maybe slightly, nudged my way in, elbowed my way in. And so the main reason, in actual fact, was on the film you saw you saw there was the Cambodia trip and Sri Lanka, and two of my students that were in my senior thesis class at the time. I know Arnie's here, and Ali I think I've seen as well. I've not seen Casey yet. Two of those students were in my section. And when they came back after their experience, there was a way that they spoke about it that was really profound and moving. And, they shared about their experience in our class. And as an educator, I'm always looking for those transformative moments, and I saw it in those students. And that made me really intrigued because, we have been going through, we'd gone through a big transition in our curriculum at Parsons. And so I'm always looking for, what could be that next thing from a pedagogical perspective. And it was that I saw. It was, what is it that we can add in terms of being educators around leadership, around transformative values? And that kind of links with, my own interest in artisan craft and communities, and, how we can really empower communities, not just from a perspective of, kind of lip service, but like in real, grounded, phenomenal ways. So I wouldn't have missed the trip. It was awesome to see and to be part of it and to see how these two students were also altered by their experience.
And I'm really starting to see the power of the work that Aisha, you have had with the idea of bringing the films, because I'm having a transformative experience in the audience, and this is a topic that I have worked on for a long time, but this is life-altering because all of you are next to me here, so it's real life. It's not some documentary. It is my community who's part of it. I'll ask my next question to all three of you. So Yvonne, Yoli, and Yimin, what were your expectations going into Sri Lanka, and were there any surprises that came about through the trip?
Since I started studying at Parsons, I was learning so much about fashion, but after a point, I just realized that I still had no idea where clothes were coming from. I knew where they were made, but I was completely clueless. It's so easy for designers to just send their designs and then get the clothes ready 3 weeks later. And I was always trying to educate myself and take classes here, but still I needed that incentive to see for myself and try to explain things and stop making excuses as a designer from one hand, and also try to come up with solutions and ideas of how we can fight for it, how can we make this work better. So for me, going to Sri Lanka with Remake, I had no idea actually kind of what to expect in a way, and I just let myself just see and not talk and not defend anything, just absorb what was happening and try to make sense of it after.
Great, thank you so much. Yimin, is there something that surprised you through the trip?
Well, I don't really have expectations because I don't know enough about the supply chain to have expectations. And then the surprise, I guess it was just a very heavy and depressing and long journey for me.
Thanks, Yemen. I thought we had some fun.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate your candor. But I think we need candor in these conversations. It's come in, and Aisha, you pointed to it too, that often the real things, the real life gets hidden behind these, CSR reports, and it is real life, it's real human beings. Yvonne, is there anything that might have surprised you through the trip, and what were your expectations going in?
So in terms of expectations, I don't know that I had any specific expectations. I was there really to observe. I really wanted to majorly see, to really experience what a student's experience would be. I guess my kind of aha moment was in our really kind of like full curriculum, we don't really touch on anything like this in our design studio practice. So that was my moment of, okay, how can we deal with this? Because right now we have 2 students who've had this as an experience, or 3 students, so 5 students in total out of however many, we won't go into numbers, in the School of Fashion. And how can we actually make this experience, a much wider opportunity or a wider experience, and how might we embed this into our curriculum in a meaningful way? And one last thing I just wanted to say as well was being there at the same time that Levi's were there and being able to observe their well-being program. That was also very interesting to me, to see how a company, in its own way are taking steps and, making measures in terms of, bringing practices to really ensure that, we can build a much more equitable fashion system.
Great. And just going off script a little bit, are there any sort of immediate ideas that you have in terms of how do we bring this into the curriculum? Because we obviously can't take all of our students to Sri Lanka or Cambodia. I'm clear that film is an incredibly powerful way, and particularly when you can connect all of you who are in the film and bring them to events like this. But in terms of curriculum, do you have any ideas? And I'm really sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, slightly. Well, Aisha and I had lunch, and we are thinking of some ideas. I know that in Milano there are classes in, I took some classes in the global supply chain and business and human rights. And I don't think our students know about those classes. So, I was talking with somebody this week as well to see how we could incorporate a lot of what Aisha has already done. And, she's an incredible resource. So I think there are lots of things that we could do to actually build a suite of courses that would actually be appropriate for fashion design students. Is there anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, people often ask, why do you film, and isn't it disruptive to the connections? And this was always the vision. We're working also with California College of the Arts in San Francisco, and with this recognition that through the video, through the photographs, through the testimonials, we can build a very rich course around this.
And actually, I'll turn this to you, Yoli and Yimin, kind of off the same question, because you're coming to the end of your 4-year experience as students, and going out in the world. And I know, when we went through the process of choosing the students, we were clear that here are 2 young people who really want to make a difference in the world. So, in that sense, I'm clear who you are. And so what do you see as possible in terms of education, and what could we do as educators to amplify this experience for everybody?
Thanks for asking this question. Actually, it was part of our trip, and part of our nights in Sri Lanka was also talking about education and Parsons and what has been done throughout our studies here to help us understand or not. And I think, can I talk specifically about Parsons, or just something more general? I don't know, I'll talk about Parsons. So Parsons, freshman year, we all have to take the Sustainable Systems course, and it's amazing. We learn about New York, we learn about the environment, we learn about the water bodies, everything in terms of ecology and sustainability. I never learned or questioned anything about the production of fashion. And I think if I had taken a course then, I would have gained so much time. By going to sophomore year, I would have such a more clear idea of what's happening and what I can do. And I just had to come to reach senior year to kind of catch up, had to run and catch up on everything and study and learn, take your class, which I also think, I'm not saying it because you're here, but Timo's class, if I had taken this class when I was 18 or 19, I wouldn't, I don't know, maybe I would be here, but maybe I wouldn't, I don't know, but it's just that we have a lot of time within these 4 years to learn so much more about where our clothes come from, what is production, where do fabrics come from, who's making the fabrics, because for me materiality is also equally important. So I think just starting earlier.
Thank you. And Yemen, do you have anything to add to what you...
Just definitely a more human-centered approach to teaching sustainability.
Great. And I really mean it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for it. This is as educators, these are the things that we need to hear from you, and so it is incredibly helpful, so thank you. And I will say that the class that Ioli was in, I was able to, the class that she missed because she was in Sri Lanka, I went on Aisha's Facebook and took some photos of the factory that they visited, so the footage that you saw from the factory, and I showed it to the class and said, this is why Ioli is away. She visited this factory yesterday. And I remember you had some statistics, Aisha, about the wages and so forth. So we had a really rich conversation, almost in real time, as you were in Sri Lanka. So again, I see the power of the partnership in that sense too. What's one story for any of you, all four of you, that's stayed with you from Sri Lanka?
So I have one that I can't stop thinking about. So, we were at one of the large factories and we decided we'll just count, like how many people is it taking to make this one garment? And so I think we counted around 40. So we were sort of following and it was just stitching. At the very end of the assembly line, there was a woman that was looping in the price tag and it was 8 pounds. And you look at this line of people that are not even going to the bathroom so they can meet their quotas, and you look at that price tag, and I think that just really stayed with me. It just, the optics of it brought it home.
So I've been thinking about it since we actually went to Sri Lanka till today, and one thing that really stayed with me and was a big shocker for all of us is that women have to actually go on the streets and be prostitutes by night, and then work during the day because they had to go to the dentist, and because they didn't have money, they had to take a massive loan, and then with massive interest, and then in order to repay it, they basically had to sell their bodies for sex. And this was something that we really mentioned so many times, and you can't stop thinking about it. And then today in the documentary, I really didn't even remember that the girl that said that I want to survive this to be able to say that I survived this. Like, why do we have to have people surviving from passion? This is ridiculous. Like, it's not war.
Yeah, it's just speaking from a design perspective, we've created a world where we're faced with insane choices on a daily basis, both as people and as designers, where it's choosing between a cancer-causing fabric and a non-cancer-causing fabric, and a pair of jeans that might have killed somebody and a pair of jeans that didn't. And these are all insane choices that shouldn't exist in the first place. I just want to check, should we open it for questions? Because I really do want to make sure that you get a chance to ask questions of these amazing four people. So.
And 2 requests. One, if you could, in 4 words, introduce yourself. So we'd love to have a conversation and know who you are. Yeah. And 2, if you could actually ask a question. We have a reception afterwards where we can have a conversation, but questions would be great.
Is this on?
Yep. If there's another Remake person, I can give another mic to have a mic runner here.
Hi, everyone. that. My name's Alex Lee. I'm actually currently a merchandise planner at a large retailer, specialty retailer. And I was wondering, we talked a lot about empowering the next generation of designers, what there is that we could do to empower and educate other people in that cross-functional team to be aware of this, and because they are part of the decision-making process.
Yeah, I have something that I can say to that. So one of the things that I discovered from the students who went last year and that we spoke about this year as well is last-minute decision-making in the design process. And I think it is something that is, very much embedded in our ways of being and acting and practicing as designers, because it's that thing of the creative spark can only come at the last minute. And, we've heard lots of anecdotes about designers who, a whole collection has been designed by the creative team, and then the designer comes in and hates all of it, and then it has to go and, through manufacturing and production again. That has a distinct impact on a community like you see in the video. It's those last-minute changes that either drive, they have to have overtime. Sometimes it's overtime that's probably not paid. And, that kind of like whimsical way that we kind of like deal with design, like we can only, arrive at, the best idea at the last minute. We are grounded in that. That's part of our kind of, fashion DNA. And if we could do, better around that and be much more mindful about our decision-making processes, it would have a distinctive impact on a community like this.
Hi there, my name's Linda. I studied at the New School in the International Affairs program, and I currently work for a nonprofit organization named BRAC. It's headquartered and based in Bangladesh, and I work closely with the garment sector portfolio there. My question is to all of you. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your stories. We've clearly recognized the detriments to the planet. We've recognized the lack of decent work and social protections for garment workers. I'm curious to learn from you and from your different perspectives, who is the biggest driver of change in all of this? Is it the brands and buyers? Is it the consumers? Is it local stakeholders on the grounds, the local civil society organizations, Stand Up Lanka that we saw making moves, working with the garment workers themselves? I'm just curious if anyone can speak to that, please.
I have a very clear perspective on this. These are wicked, systematic problems, and it's going to take all of that. But I think from Remake's standpoint, one of the things that really needed a reboot and a refresh is how to engage customers from a source of inspiration. This sort of story of how our clothes are made, especially since we offshore production in the 1990s, is not new, right? We all know this in the deep recesses of our mind that it doesn't come from very good places. But I think just in terms of all the greenwashing out there, in terms of sort of the misunderstanding of how to read a label, thinking that something is sustainable and not. And so we're really playing on that nexus of this is better than that. So buy X brand, not Y brand, and sort of making it easy for you to live your values, because I do think that us sending signals as consumers back to the system to say, I want more conscious, slower, better fashion is a core and missing ingredient in this puzzle.
And very much along those lines, and also echoing what Paul said earlier, we all can make a difference. And it really you can start making a difference tonight. By finding out something that you didn't know before and just becoming more informed. And I do encourage you to do it without any guilt. The guilt that we all get when we see films like this is really unproductive, and to just put that aside and get informed and get into action.
I really enjoyed the proceedings so far. I teach in international affairs. I'm Sakiko Fukuda Par, and I work on human rights and development. And what is your perspective on dealing with the root causes of this? Because in a sense, I think sustainability, as consumers, environmental sustainability issues are much easier to deal with because the impact of the fashion industry on environmental sustainability is, in a sense, relatively straightforward to analyze. But the social impact is much more complicated. And so you talk about labeling, but how do you know what clothing would have more positive social sustainability? I mean, all these conditions of decent work and so forth are much more difficult to deal with. I mean, isn't there a better way to deal with the politics of this? Getting corporations to stop promoting policies, economic policies, trade policies that actually lead to these socially unsustainable practices. For example, there is the idea of having really enforceable human rights standards, and I don't mean through trade, I mean through international standards.
One of the reasons we don't make progress as an industry is because for too often we're all sort of pointing blame every which way, right? So the brands will say, well, it's the government's fault, and then you sort of plot where a lot of fast fashion is, and if labor law is here, enforcement is here, right? And then the government will say, well, the unions are not really functioning and they're corrupt. And then, and I think we sort of start to have this circularity of conversation. From my perspective, there's a very simple answer to the root cause. It's we are buying too much for too little, and it's coming to us too fast. That's really the root cause.
I have nothing to add to that.
And we have time for one more question. You want to get some from that side?
Hi, my name's Hazel Clark. I teach at Parsons. Congratulations on the film. I mean, films can be very powerful, in raising consciousness, as we saw with the true cost. So my question is, where does Remake go next? Will there be more films? Where will this film be screened? How do we get involved, etc.?
There's so many ways to get involved, as Timo and you all know. So in terms of what's next, we're currently actually filming in LA. One of the reasons we do this is that there's a lot of myth around made in America, and especially now in the current political environment, we're picking up a lot of chatter that somehow if it's made in the US, it's great. And so the storyline is sort of focused on good and bad factories in LA to really give people an understanding of what that looks like. We are then in the fall headed to Mexico, and so we do about 2 or 3 journeys a year. In terms of other ways to get involved on our platform through these conversations, we're constantly trying to help you in the journey of how in your consumer life you can make little decisions so as not to get overwhelmed, as Timo said. So I hope you come to the reception. We can keep talking about other ways to be engaged, but from a film standpoint, it's LA and Mexico next.
Can I ask one last question to all of you? What would be one thing that you would like the audience to leave here with tonight? And maybe start with you, Aisha.
I think for all of us to come from a place of hope, numbers officially are 60 million. You start to get into subcontracted factories, we're talking 120 million, mostly young women who are millennial age that power this industry. And I think big and small ways, there are brands that we can support, like Levi's, that's going out there and talking about the well-being of their communities. That's really rather brave, So I really hope that no matter how dark the conversation, you leave here with a sense of hope and inspiration, whether as a designer, a practitioner, or a consumer, that you can really wear your values and join us in this movement.
I guess for me, it's really like your humility as a designer. Get over yourself, we've been so rooted in this melodramatic rhetoric that designer is so fabulous, on the top, gets all the attention, even Alvin Image switching designers, but it's just a bunch of unpaid CSM interns doing all this design for them, and then how do we acknowledge them? So really break the hierarchy and dynamics of fashion.
Keeping it real.
Always,
Yoli or Yvonne, do you want to add anything?
Okay, so I think, just echoing what Timo said, there's no guilt in this. That all that there is an opportunity for you to, rethink your current practices. And there's a lot of people here this evening, so there's a message that you've heard, there's a conversation that's here, there's an opportunity for you to just kind of like go and share that. And if you just take, your own personal actions in, being mindful about, what it is you are purchasing, then, we've made a start with something. We know that this whole thing, where we've landed is not going to be solved or resolved like overnight. This is a systemic issue, and it's going to take time for this to be remade.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that did not happen overnight, so of course the solution is not gonna come to us overnight. But also what I ever since we came back from Sri Lanka, what I go by as a rule to explain to people what we saw and what the problem is that basically a T-shirt of $5 is not made there's so many wrongs with it. And for us, for people in the Western world, buying a T-shirt of $15 instead of the T-shirt of $10 or $5 will not really make a difference to us, but to the people in the assembly line will be such a huge difference. So just thinking about these small things and making smarter choices, maybe, give more time to these choices at some point, but it won't cost us as much, but it will be tremendous difference in people there.
Great. That's a great way to finish. I really thank all four of you for the wonderful conversation, so thank you.
Thank you so much.
I now have the really great pleasure of introducing our closing speaker. And it really is a personal pleasure for me. Introducing Abrima Awia. She is the co-founder and co-creative director of a social enterprise called Studio 189 that she co-founded with the actress and activist Rosario Dawson. And Studio 189 is focused on achieving social impact as it relates to education, economic and employment opportunities, and empowerment. And with the mission of using fashion as an agent of social change, Studio 189 seeks to provide a platform to help promote and curate African and African-inspired content through various projects such as media and cultural events. And Abrima has more than 16 years of fashion and luxury experience. She is a former global marketing and communications executive for Bottega Veneta, and she was there for nearly a decade. And I invited Abrima to come and complete the event for us because I've got to know her over the past year or so through the CFDA Lexus Fashion Initiative, where Studio 189 is one of the 5 brands in this one-year-long program. And Abrima has been such an inspiring force in that program. Even though I'm officially an advisor, I have learned so much from you. So I was thrilled when she said that she would be happy to come and say some closing remarks. So without further ado, please welcome Abrima.
Wow. That was an amazing introduction. First of all, I want to say thank you. When I was sitting there listening to all the speeches and all the conversation, I was going to say, I'm going to start by saying thank you, and someone in the audience is going to say, I'm sure she's going to say thank you. But thank you. And the reason is because, when we started this a few years ago, there wasn't this kind of platform and this kind of stage, or at least I didn't feel like there was, where people were genuinely interested in hearing about other people's stories, but also more than that, genuinely interested in actually doing something and not just talking about it. And I feel from the movie to the panel, that there's a lot of energy towards, actually creating real change. So I'm just gonna tell you a little bit about my story and some insights. putting my water down. My story, some insights. So my name is Abrima Urwia. I started a brand called Studio 189 that's based between Ghana and the United States. So we're in New York and Accra. I am half American, half West African. My mom is from Mississippi, and my father is from Ivory Coast in Ghana. I went to NYU and studied in Italy. This is important because one of the beauties of having studied in Italy was that I was able to meet. I fell in love with the culture naturally, the clothes, the energy, the way people can go on and on about a glass of wine and the grapes and how beautiful it is. I mean, it was amazing. And when I came back, I wanted to keep the culture, so I started working for Italian luxury companies. And something that I always found really powerful was the commitment to craft and to artisans and to second, third generation artisans, and the way somebody could talk, like you could go to a place where something is made, and it's not just that people earn more money, but they're respected. You know, like the culture empowers them and wants them to succeed, and you're proud to wear something that's made by Armani. You're proud to wear something that's made by Gucci or whichever brand you're talking about. And I found that really, really inspiring. But then when I would go visit my family or go to other developing economies, I would just see that there was equally incredible artisans, as we saw in this film, but people doing handwork that is just like insane. Like, why, like almost to the point, like, why do you still do that? You know, and it was so beautiful. And they could go on and on and on and talk to you about where the dye comes from and why they do it in the plant and how it has healing properties. For example, indigo, and how it has healing properties. And it was just incredible. And but I found that a lot of people were reaching a glass ceiling, and it was really hard to get from point A to point Z. And so I empowered with that. Similar to the students that were on the stage, I was passionate and I was excited, and I went back to work, and when I would have 2 weeks off, I would take these 2-week vacations where I would go into the community and try to make a difference, but it didn't feel like it was enough. And so eventually my current partner invited me to the Congo. She sits on the board of V-Day, which is Eve Ensler's organization that's dedicated to stopping violence against women and rape, where in the Congo it's not only it's beyond rape. I mean, it's used as a weapon of war, and the types of stories in which you hear is beyond human understanding. It's disgusting. I mean, it's terrible. But what the City of Joy is it's a place where they say you turn your pain to power. It's organized by the women. It's set up by the women, and it's a place where women are learned skills and retaught skills in an effort to get them back into the community. And Rosario and I took this incredible journey. I was at the time working at Bottega Veneta. It was Fashion Week, and I remember I had to go to my boss and ask if I could go to the Congo. I was terrified. I was like, she's gonna say you're crazy, and she said yes, and I was like, okay. And I got to New York, and you know, to get into the Congo, you have to do a really long. I don't know if you understand. It's in Central Africa. You have to do a long journey. So we were supposed to go from New York to Brussels to Bujumbura, which is in Burundi, and drive through Rwanda to get into the Congo to this place. Fast forward, going into the city, trying to get these visas, it was very difficult, but one of the things that we found, which I think is really important towards my story, is that when the facilitator said it was impossible, we're never gonna get these visas, and she wouldn't help us. But when we went to the embassies, and when we put our faith into strangers, we found that all these people went out of their way to help this journey happen. And we ended up taking this incredibly crazy trip, because there was a crazy snowstorm that shut all the airports down, that took us from New York to Philadelphia, to London, to Kenya, to Burundi, to Rwanda, into the Congo. But one thing that's insane, outside of the fact that we did that trip, was when I was at the office and Rosario was on the airplane, and I had to call the airline to change the ticket, which I don't know why she let me do it, but she did. And I got to the airport, I picked Rosario in, we hustled to Philadelphia to try to catch this flight. We got to Philly, and the flight was pulling out of the gate, and we were like, no, you don't understand, we have to get to Bujumbura. And they were like, slow down. And then we got on the last flight to London, but when we got there, we called the airline, and the airline lady who let me change the flight was still following our journey and was helping us. She was clearing a path to help us get into the Congo. So the point of that is, what we learned is that there's no such thing as impossible, and that if you want to do something, and if the universe is speaking, it's possible to do it, especially if you work together. And so when we got to the Congo, outside of that, what we met are these amazing women, like these amazing women in the film, that were doing all this crazy stuff. They were making little tchotchkes, little beautiful crafts, and they were taking the proceeds, and they were investing in agriculture. They were farming food like cassava. They were feeding their kids. They were sending their kids to school. And it was so so powerful because where we thought we were coming in with this, we're going to make a change mentality, we realized that they're going to make the change. That change is happening. It is happening in communities all over the world. It's happening in small villages with people who you may never ever know who they are and how they play a role in the work that they're doing, but it's happening, and that they know how to make the change, and they know what changes need to be made in their communities, which ultimately impact us. So what we found is that when you give one of these women $1, the sky's the limit with what she's able to do with that. And so when we left, we were so excited, we were jazzed up, we were like, that's it. We have to do this. We have to get together, we have to collaborate with people, and we have to create the space for change to happen and be the platform. And so we left, I went back to work, started, et cetera, et cetera. Fast forward, I ended up leaving my job and moving to Uganda at first. And this story is important to me because when I was in Uganda, I met this really amazing woman named Ruth, and she was a cleaning lady. And her story, when I asked her, what do you want to do with yourself, with your life, nothing made her smile. And then she said, fashion. And it was like July 4th. Her eyes were lit, and she was really excited. And I said, why? And she was like, I don't know why. And then her story was that years before, when al-Shabaab, the terrorist group, bombed Uganda in retaliation for troops in Somalia, she was pulled out of school and became a cleaning lady. And at a certain point, it's really hard to get people to get back to school. But we created this program in Uganda, and eventually she ended up joining the program and then applying for school. And now she was like deathly afraid of using computers. Now she uses computers. She one time sent me this email and was like, hi, it's Ruth, and I thought it was spam, but I realized it was Ruth. And I just was so moved because it was so clear that fashion could be an agent for change and it could make a difference. So fast forward that year, so this is 2013, we launched Studio 189 officially. I moved back to Ghana, where I'm half Ghanaian, and it was really important for us to eliminate the us and them mentality. I think there's a mentality that tends to happen where we feel like we're disconnected from other people, which is very clear when people don't know where their clothes come from. But when you move into a country or you visit a country and spend time there, you start to realize that there's really no difference between you and someone else. And I feel that way. When I see young girls selling things on the street, I could be that girl. The other girl somebody mentioned who was a prostitute, and I could be that. There's no difference. The difference was that somebody gave me an opportunity and led to another opportunity, and that led to another opportunity. So I feel myself extremely connected within the course of that value chain. So the way we set up is we decided to go bottom up. So we started a factory through a program with the United Nations International Trade Center. We work with very specialized artisans that specialize in different techniques, and our approach was to look at the value chain and figure out how we could have impact throughout the value chain. So we say we try to go kind of from farm to consumer, like the farm to food movement. So we grow our own dyes, we weave. So for example, this jacket is organic cotton from Burkina Faso. I don't know if you can see it, but it's woven, it's grown locally, it's turned into yarn locally. The women weave it, it's put on a bus, it's brought to Accra, and then we cut and sew in our factory, and then it's either sold locally or it's shipped internationally. But the power in that, I think, and also we do other things like this is batik, which is basically like a block dye resisting technique or hand painting techniques. We do lots of techniques, but the power in that is that one is that it's completely localized. Two, we do 90% of the work in local markets, and we import only when we need to. And I find it really rewarding. It's allowed us to create jobs. It's allowed us to support education. It's allowed us to know that, for people to know that they can do it themselves, and it's very empowering. And I also think it's nice when you can show the breadth of what people can create, because I think a lot of times there's a misconception about what happens, like what is African. I think a lot of people have an idea that's very charity focused, and it's hard for them to break the cycle and to connect between what we do and what happens somewhere else. And that is just nonsensical, because it's funny because they're watching what we're doing here. If we're live streaming right now, someone's probably watching it, And with that being said, lots of stuff has happened, one of which is now we're in the CFDA program. I'm gonna fast forward. We've now opened 2 stores, one in New York and one in Accra. But one of the lessons that I've learned from doing this is, for example, I was thinking about a conversation I had about a week ago with somebody, and she was talking to me for a consulting job, and she said, you know, how is this going to work? You're interested in sustainability and ethical things, and this is a business, so how are you going to reconcile those things? And I said, what? It doesn't work like that. We're all connected. It's all one value chain. And to give you an example, a few years ago, we did a fashion show. It was our first fashion show, or it was a presentation, and we had 3 models, and we showed at the Lower East Side Girls Club. And we had these beautiful girls, and at the end of the presentation, I wanted to give a talk so people understood why they were there and why they were supporting this project. And somebody, the wrangler, was like, no, they have to leave, they can't be here. And I was like, please, just give me 5 minutes. And the girls stayed, and I gave this talk. At the end of the night, we had an after party at a club. These ladies attacked me, basically. They were so happy. They were so happy. They were crying. They were talking about how they spoke to their mother, how they never got to do a job like that. And this one woman said something that really touched our hearts. She said to me, 1 in 3, because we say the statistic is 1 in 3 women will be raped or sexually violated. She said, I'm 1 in 3. And we had 3 ladies on the stage. And she said, my rapist is in jail. Now, to look at this beautiful woman, you would never consider that this could be part of her story, because the story, it doesn't mean anything. And that's the point. You can't really attach a story to a specific area or geography. We're all connected. Because she attached herself to this story, she's now worn these clothes. Because of her, we can increase our orders. Because of that, on the ground, we're able to create more work, which impacts more people. So the woman who has a job, whose child is in the village, is impacted. So for example, we have a cleaning lady, she's impacted. We've now hired her daughter. Her daughter's now gone back to school and is doing computer science. And that woman originally couldn't read or write. And we're all connected, and it all comes back around. And I think that that was just something that I really wanted to say, and I thought that was important to know. And I also thought it's important to realize that there isn't one thing that anybody has to do. A lot of times, I think you were saying, a lot of times when I speak, somebody says, I want to quit my job too, and I want to move to a country, and I'm going to go do this. And I don't think you need to do that. I think that, the beauty is that you can make these decisions in your lives now. With every day, every action you take, every decision you make, you have impact, The assistant that sits in an office that looks at 2 sets of resumes and decides who gets an opportunity to be interviewed and doesn't push a resume through because they can't pronounce somebody's name, they had a role in that. They have impact. And if you realize that, and I think if we see each other as brothers and sisters, then we start to see how the chain is connected. And like you were saying at the beginning about humanity, I think that we can look at it like humanity and like family. And then when you think about things like that, you don't want to ruin the planet. You don't want to live in a world that way. And I think, I know my time is up. I think that's where we are. But I want to leave with this. You really don't know how your impact will make a difference. We don't know what the impact of sustainability is going to be. And, when I walked in, Timo was telling me how in 1964, Martin Luther King spoke on this stage, which to me, again, is incredible. And in my story, I'm just going to say a quick story. My mother is from Mississippi, which is the most racist state in America that didn't want to end slavery. And my mother was born 29 years before civil rights even began. And her sister wanted to be a model. So my mom moved to New York, and she had a younger sister, and she wanted to be a model. And she went to Ford, and she asked them for a contract to be a model, and they said, no, you're too dark, you're too African looking, you can't sell product. It wasn't the right time. So she went and got a photographer to take a photo of her. And that photograph landed on the cover of New York Times Sunday Times Style in 1967. And in 1969, it spearheaded the Black is Beautiful movement. And she went on then to do modeling and become known as the first Black supermodel and model on lots of different things. But the point is I don't think she knew when she decided to have somebody take her photograph that she would have that impact. How can you know? You have no idea. Who knows who in this audience, like every little action we do will have impact. And I think that oftentimes the people who have the most impact are the people you'll never know. It's the silent soldiers, it's the people that sit next to you. You'll never even know their name and how they've helped you. And I think that if we think about it that way and we connect ourselves that way, I think that we can make a huge difference. And I think that the time for that is right now. And I'm really blessed that I was able to speak. I'm really blessed that everybody sees us as one family. And I really hope that the students that were on stage, the students that are in the audience, and everybody from top down across will join together and figure out how we can create a more sustainable future. So thank you for having me.
So thank you all so very much for staying with us on your rainy Friday night. You know, you didn't go to Passover or Easter, you came and hung out with us. What a privilege. So for those of you who are registered, but we should have room for more, we are ready to party and continue the conversation. So it's right across the courtyard, Woolman Hall. We have food, we have drinks. The students are excited to show you their thesis and how they've been inspired from this journey. And we want to keep talking to you. So join us. It's right across the courtyard, and we can show you. 5th floor, Woolman Hall. Thank you.